no one has found him. That is the first and most important thing to understand about Ornn. Not the forges, not the libel artifacts, not the legends that surround what his hands have produced over the centuries. The OFIRST thing is this. The greatest craftsman who has ever existed in Runeterra lives alone beneath a dormant volcano and has, for reasons no one has been able to ask him about directly, chosen to, alone, remain completely unreachable. People have tried. Scholars, warlords, rulers who believed that the right kind of request, delivered with the right kind of deference, would be enough to bring him to the door. They have reason. All found nothing, or they have not come back to report what they found. His name is Ornn. And the silence around him is not absence, it is a decision. New here? Subscribe. Every week, a League of Legends story, told the way it deserves to be heard. The stories about him begin before written history in FullLore, which means they begin before almost anyone alive can verify them, passed down through the specific oral traditions of cultures that understood survival better than documentation. What the oldest accounts agree on, Ornn was among the first children of the demi-gods. He arrived in the world with the same inheritance. The others carried power that exceeded anything mortal, a connection to the elements that operated at a level most living things could not perceive, and he immediately diverged from them in every meaningful way. Where others sought followers, Ornn sought solitude. Where others built cults of personality or waged wars for territory, Ornn went underground. Literally. He found the dormant volcano. He built his forge beneath it, in the specific way that someone builds a space they intend to inhabit seriously, not for an afternoon, not for a season, but as the primary fact of existence. He shaped stone. He arranged ventilation. He created the wells feature, conditions under which a fire could burn at exactly the temperature his work required, and wells, wells, nothing more and nothing less. Then he began to make things. Silence. Focus. The particular discipline of a mind that has decided what it is for and refuses. Distraction. These were not virtues Ornn cultivated through effort. They were the shape of him. The way water is wet, not because it tries, but because that is what water is. He did not seek solitude because company was unpleasant. He sought it because what he was trying to do, wanakavadain, required a quality of attention that other presences disrupted. He worked, he produced. And what his hands made was something outside the ordinary, categories of craftsmanship. Not simply better, not simply more durable, but different in kind. Objects that carried within them the logic of their making with such completeness that they vina margar seemed less like manufactured things and more like discovered ones. As if the shield or the blade or the tool had always been waiting in the material, and Ornn had simply been precise enough to weave in it. Here is what the legends about Ornn's work consistently fail to capture. It was not about the objects, it was about what the objects made possible. A tool that does not fail at the critical possible moment is not just a better tool, it is the difference between a life lived and a life lost, between a life lost, between a boy, structure that shelters a community through a brutal winter and one that doesn't, between a civilization that persists and one that doesn't. Some claim that the shield Braum carries, the one he tore from the door of a vault to save the miners trapped behind it, the one that has absorbed everything FullLore and the forces that move through it have thrown at it for longer than anyone can reliably date, was made by Ornn. There is no way to confirm this. Ornn is not available for confirmation. But the shield has not bent, it has bone, not cracked. It has not shown the particular fatigue that metal shows when it has been asked to absorb too much for too long. And the people who study such things quietly note that there are very few explanations for that, and most of them lead back to the volcano. There were people who wanted to learn from him. They found him eventually, or rather, they found the mountain, which was close enough to being the same thing. The hearthblood. Smiths, architects, craftspeople, and apprentices drawn from every corner of Runeterra by the same instinct that draws serious practitioners of any discipline toward the person who does it best. They built their settlement on the slopes of Ornn's volcano. They organized themselves around the idea of him without requiring him to participate in the organization. He did not embrace them. He did not send them away. He acknowledged their work with the specific economy of a person who does not waste expression, a nod when something was done well, a narrowing of the eyes when it was not, the ibo paitiasare. Hearthblood interpreted these signals with the careful attention of people who have decided that proximity to greatness is worth the difficulty of communicating with it. They worked harder, they got better. The quality of what they produced across generations became genuinely remarkable. The finest tools, the most enduring structures, the food and drink that people who ate it described in terms that sounded less like description and more like spiritual testimony. Ornn, in his way, was watching. Not warmly, not with the uncomplicated approval of a teacher who delights in students, but with the specific attention of someone who had decided long ago that people were generally Riva. Disappointing him was observing, quietly and without expectation, whether this particular group intended to prove him wrong. They were proving him wrong. Mortals, with their brief lives and their inherited limitations and their inexhaustible capacity for distraction, they were building something real, using what they had learned from watching him, from the fragments of technique they had managed to absorb from the occasional moment. When the forge door was open and a trained eye could see what he was doing, they were Baha'd, reaching towards something larger than any one of them. That was not a small thing. Ornn knew how rare it was because he had seen how rarely it happened. And then his brother came. Volibear arrived the way Volibear arrived at everything, as weather. As the specific quality of a Hasquastorm that has decided on a direction and reorganized the world around that decision. The tree. Reasons, whatever moved between two demigod siblings that no mortal has been able to fully reconstruct, were opaque. The disagreement was ancient. What it was about, in the deepest point sense, was probably not something either of them could have articulated in terms a third party would have found satisfying. What happened was not opaque. The battle that erupted on the summit of that mountain was the kind of event that rearranges geography, fire, ash. A force that operated so far beyond the scale of ordinary conflict that the communities 10 horizons away, who saw it on the skyline, understood immediately that they were observing something outside the normal categories of danger. It was visible for distances that should have made it invisible. It was audible through materials that should have muffled it completely. When it was finished, the Hearthblood settlement was gone, not damaged, not driven away, erased by the particular indifference of power operating at a scale that does not distinguish between intended and unintended targets. The people who had spent generations getting better, reaching further, building toward something, the charred bones of them were mixed with the ash of what they had made, scattered across the crater that used to be the slopes where they had worked. Ornn stood in what remained. He did not make a sound. He was not the kind of person who made sounds in response to things. He stood and he looked at the scope of what the collision between two immortals had produced, in terms of mortal consequence, and he felt the specific weight of it. Not guilt exactly, because the direct causation was not his, but something adjacent to guilt. The recognition that his immortal cant of existence, in the particular form it took, had costs that the people around him could not factor into their choices because they could not know to factor them in. The Hearthblood had not known that living near him meant living near the blast radius of Anshan, whatever conflict might eventually find him. They had not known. He had not told them. He had watched them build and been quietly moved by what they were building, and had not told them the one thing that might have changed their Contham build. Decision. He sealed himself inside the forge, not for a day, not for a season, for an age, the kind of time measurement that only makes sense, for beings who will not die in the ordinary way. He worked, he made things, he did not allow himself the consideration of what the things were for, or who they might eventually reach, because the answer to that question required him to think about the people who used objects, and what happened to them when larger forces moved through their world without caring about the difference between civilian and combatant. He had already learned what he needed to know about that. The world is changing again. He can feel it from inside the mountain, not through intelligence or report, but through the specific sensitivity to large forces that comes with being what he is. Something is moving at the top edges. Some of the old powers are returning to shapes they have not occupied for a very long time. The things that existed before the current arrangement of the world, the things that Pansi Suwe Wathasuri operated on the scale of what happened at the summit of his mountain, are stirring. Freljord is fragmenting. The old terrors from the time before names are moving through the run. Shadows between the clans, waiting for the moment when the fractures are wide enough that something can walk through them unopposed. And someone is going to need tools for what comes next. Not ordinary tools, the kind that do not break when the thing coming at them is the specific variety of ancient and enormous that does not respond to ordinary breakage. The kind that were made with the quality of attention that makes the difference between an instrument that holds under pressure and one that does not. The kind that come from a forge that has been burning without interruption for longer than the current shape of the world has existed. Ornn knows this. He is still underground. He has not announced a change of plans. He has not sent word to Runeterra, Rai, Heaven Delai, Hev Abanai, anyone, because sending word to anyone requires knowing who is worth sending word to Runeterra and Delai. That requires information he would have to emerge to gather, but the fire in the forge is burning at a temperature it has not burned at in a very long time. Something is being made. What it is for, and who it will reach, and whether the cost of making it, the cost of existing, of being the kind of thing that other large forces eventually come to find, will again fall on people who did not know they were standing in the wrong place. That is the question. He has not answered it yet. He keeps working. The hammer keeps falling. The mountain holds the heat. And somewhere above him, the world is moving toward the kind of moment that will ask everything of the things built to face it. If this story reached you, subscribe. Every week, the full lore of a League of Legends champion, told the way it was meant to be heard.